In this video, we are going to continue with our topic, which is how do organisms reproduce. In the previous video, we have learned about reproduction in case of asexual plants and other life forms. In this video, we are going to cover little bit more about the sexual reproduction. Now, before starting with this sexual reproduction, what do you mean by, let us get familiarized with the term variation. Now, can you guess what do you mean by variation? Now, if you see or if you observe me and you, we might have difference in appearance, hair, head shape, gender biasness, and so on and so forth. So, what do you mean by variation? Now, the variation is nothing but the changes, the phenotypic and the genotypic, or in case in terms of physical appearance, the difference between in us physical appearance and genetic makeup is known as variation. Now, when you are going to see a normal plant, a rice flower and its further generation does not look different. They look same, but they might have a change in their phenotypes. Now, that is because the plants, the lower plants, they usually reproduce by sexual reproduction. In case of sexual reproduction, the variation cannot be seen at a very much. In this case, the asexual reproduction, we cannot see variation because the whole genetic makeup, the whole part of an organism is directly transferred to its next generation. But in case of there is, so how do we observe variations in different organisms? So there is another mode of reproduction which is known as sexual reproduction. Now, when we are saying sexual reproduction, here we are usually talking about the fusion of gametes or the fusion of DNA which the organisms are made up of. Here, in case we are seeing there are two genders or there are usually two different organisms which are differed in their physical and their genotype, that is the male and the female. Now, in your case, the male has a male gamete which is also known as sperm, and here in case of sperm, or you can say, or usually we can say it as a male gamete, or and the second one is female gamete which is egg, or which is also known as ova in case. Now, here if we consider a male, the male has a diploid gamete. Now, diploid, when we see both male and female, they both have diploid gametes. What do you mean by diploid gametes? They have one chromosome has two copies in there. That is known as the diploid. So, but in case of asexual also, we can see there is diploid. But here, if we fuse the male, if we fuse a 2n which is a diploid of a male, and if we fuse 2n of a female which is also a diploid, we can get 4n, which is very unstable in certain organisms or even usually higher animals. Some organism might adapt to the 4n, which is tetraploidy, which is also known as tetraploidy. So what happens in this case is that 2n is actually bifurcated into n cells, or which are the 4n cells from one n to n cell, and this process is known as meiosis. Now, in case of meiosis, as we have told, the 2n haploid cell is getting converted into, or getting divided to be more precise, getting divided into male gamete and female gametes which are haploid in nature. When we say haploid in nature, the n of the sperm or the male gamete and the n of the female egg, which is also n, fuses to give you a 2n. And the variation or the changes or the phenotypes of male and the phenotype and the genotype of the female, the changes both combine with each other to produce a new variant or a new variation which cannot be observed in case of asexual reproduction. Now, let us try to understand sexual reproduction in case of flowers. Now, as we know, flowers, we have seen many types of flowers. Now, in this context to the reproduction, there are two types of flowers. Now, the first one is unisexual flower, where two different flowers might be of might have two different gametes, male and female. Whereas in case of bisexual flowers, one flower can have both the male part as well as female parts. Here we are seeing a here in this case we are seeing a case of a bisexual flower. Especially one of the examples of bisexual flower is hibiscus flower. Now this is the structure of the whole flower, the sexual organs. Now here the sexual organs are divided into two parts. One is known as stamen, which is a male part, and another one is a pistils, which are the female part. Now let us try to understand the male part, which is the stamen. Now here these two stalks which you can see are your nothing but your stamen. Now here it is divided into two main parts. One is the body, which contains a male gamete, which is nothing but anther. Now anther is, as you might have observed, that when you touch the flower you might get golden dust. Then those are nothing but your anthers. So anthers contains the male gametes, and the support which gives it the support is known as your filament, a normal filament. Collectively the anther and the filament are known as your stamens. Now when we are seeing in case of female part, it is nothing but it is known as your pistils. Now here in case of pistils, this is the main structure which is present at the center of the flower. Now here the upper part is known as your stigma. Now the stigma usually contains sugars, sticky substances, and the function of the stigma is to receive the pollen grains. So basically what happens is that the anther gets settles down in the stigma, which has a sticky nature, so that the anther cannot fly back. So that is the function of the stigma. And the style is nothing but the tube which connects the stigma to the main ovules. Now so you can say it as the style is nothing but a passage through which the pollen grains can go from upwards to the downwards. Now the process of passage, or the process in which the anther gets stuck or gets settles down on the stigma, this process is known as pollination. There are many kinds of pollination, like self-pollination, cross-pollination. In case of self-pollination, the anther of the own plant gets pollinated on its own flower. That is known as self-pollinated. And in case of cross-pollinated, it generally involves two different plants, where one provides male gamete and the second one provides female gametes. Now here, as the anther gets stuck on the stigma, it gets passed on to the style, and at last it reaches the ovule, where it fuses with the female gamete which are present in ovules. Now these ovules, after getting fertilization, they grow and they mature to form a whole seed, or you can say it can form a whole new zygote, which is nothing but the fusion of the male and the female gametes. For now, this much. So this was the topic for the today, and I hope I will see you next time.